Jack Lemmon loved acting. Legend has it, whenever the cameras rolled on a film set, he would always announce, "It's magic time." Lemmon's first big break came in the 1955 film Mr. Roberts, for which he won the Best Supporting Actor Academy Award. And he went on to become the first person to also win a Best Actor Oscar for Save the Tiger in 1973. A master of both comedy and drama, his desire to be an actor went back to his childhood, which he discusses here with Michael Aspel in an interview from 1970.
Jack Lemmon, your father was an executive in the Donut Corporation of America, but you decided pretty early not to follow him in the business, didn't you?
I did. For whatever reasons, probably highly neurotic, I always wanted to be an actor as long as I can remember. And then he made the mistake of letting me go in a local show with him called Gold in Them Thar Hills when I was about 4 or 5. And I had one great line, like I heard a pistol shot or something or other. And that did it. And from then on, I just stayed in it. He had a marvelous line, not to dwell on this too long, but I will never forget, and I will love him always for his advice to me and his attitude when I decided, after I was through with my schooling and everything, to try to be a professional actor. And he said, "You're sure you don't want to come in my company and start at the bottom?" Which he had wanted me to do, quite understandably. And I said, "No, I've got to give this a good try." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, 2 questions." Now, his company made donuts and donut machines and bread and so forth, the baking industry in general. He said, "Do you love it?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you need it?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, good, because when the day comes that I don't find love in a loaf of bread, I'm going to quit." And I love him for saying that, you know. I knew what he meant.
Lemmon is your name, isn't it?
I'm afraid so. Yeah. What's worse is my middle initial is U. So as a kid, I was traumatic by the age of 9 from hearing Jack, you, Lemmon, Jack at school all the time from the kids.
Did the studio ever want you to change it?
Yes, Harry Cohen, the late head of Columbia Pictures, who was a very feared man. I had a marvelous relationship with him, but when I first met him, I had never met him until I finished my first film with Judy Holliday called It Should Happen to You, and he called me up to his office, and I thought, well, good, finally I'm meeting my boss, you see. And I walked in, and this very imposing figure, the sun coming in the one open shade that happened to shine on the top of his bald head, said, "The name is out." I said, "What name?" I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "It's going to be Lennon." I said, "Lennon? How do you spell it?" He said, Lennon instead of Lemmon. And I said, "And you pronounce it how?" He said, "Lennon." And as a joke, I said, "Oh, you better not do that because they'll think I'm a Russian revolutionary." And right away he said, "No, I looked it up. It's Lenin." But I didn't change it, and he didn't push me on it.
You're a very honest actor. You don't approve of the method, for example, I gather.
I don't approve of the method. I approve of any method that works for you if it's legitimately used. I don't approve of any method, quote unquote, in which the method and how you work becomes more important than the result. In other words, I think an awful lot of young actors get deluded thinking that they are becoming tremendously immersed in the material and the part and the character, etc. But they forget that it doesn't matter whether they're immersed in it or whether they are really becoming the character if the audience believes. They forget about the audience. The highest compliment, I think, that an actor can ever be paid is not you're great, you're terrific, you're magnificent, or any of those overdone bromides and superlatives, but that having once seen a particular performance, you can never imagine another actor playing that part.
Lemmon was someone audiences always believed in. No matter who he was portraying, he always seemed to get it just right. And how he approached this challenge is something he spoke about to Michael Parkinson in 1972.
I think the thing that fascinates me about actors is the sort of, not being one myself at all, as it's quite obvious to anybody who watches this programme, but if you, as a technique, Jack, are there certain keys to a character? Are there things that happen, quite by chance perhaps, that all of a sudden, the revelation?
Mm-hmm. And it's a terribly difficult thing to explain, but they can. You can work and work for weeks and weeks. You can search and delve and dig and rehearse and everything, and you still haven't quite got him. It doesn't feel right. It isn't full, and it isn't there. And sometimes it gets worse and worse. You really are lost. And then one little thing, and it can be external, too. It can be the way you tilt your head, the way you walk, or whatever, can do it like that. And I remember reading an article by Larry Olivier in which he said that he was in about a third or fourth week of rehearsal of a play, and he could not get the character. And one day when they were breaking from rehearsal and going to lunch, it looked overcast, and he brought his umbrella along. And it wasn't yet raining, so he was carrying it like a cane. And all of a sudden, the whole part came to him as he walked across the street. He swears the entire part came to him after 3 weeks of nothing by the walk and the way he carried the thing. The whole manner, everything about him changed, and he had it. And it was there. It was irrevocable. And I can understand it. It can happen. It sounds silly, but it's true. Those little things can do it.
Years later, Lemmon gave another example of how he found his way into a part, talking about his role in the 1989 film Dad, in which he was playing a character struggling with old age.
You have to be physically an old man. What did you do to be...
Well, of course, from the time I knew I was going to play the part, I just started studying people, you know, to get the slower movements were the thing for me, because I have a lot of excess nervous energy, and trying to get the hand slightly arthritic, slightly shaking, and to move very, very slowly, and the voice sort of through a screen, etc. And the walk, the lower, a lower center of gravity. Yeah. I don't know how to explain this walk to you, but the whole thing is that whatever you're going to do in the physical aspects, the outer coating of a character, it's something that should be embedded in you by the time you're out of rehearsals. You shouldn't have to think of that while you're playing. You play the man, and the physical stuff takes care of itself, hopefully. And I was worried about the walk. How the hell am I going to explain this? All I knew is I wanted to lower my center of gravity, you know, so that
What as if your wife runs a drum?
And finally, what I used, sometimes we use images, as you know, you have an image of this or of a giraffe, whatever you want, anything that works. But I suddenly one day in rehearsal got the image of someone who had, have you ever tried to walk when you've had an accident in your pants?
Not since I was about 6.
What you do, first of all, you don't, I don't mean to be crude about this, no, but it's true, but it works.
Go on, be crude.
You don't put your legs together.
No.
And you don't walk erect. You walk very carefully. It slowed everything down, and I just didn't move fast. It was the greatest thing in the world for me. From then on, once I had that man, I never moved fast. It was perfect. Everybody said, isn't that a convincing thing? They didn't know how I got it. What the hell?
Perhaps the perfect example of Lemmon inhabiting a role came in one of his most enduring films, Billy Wilder's Some Like It Hot. Along with Tony Curtis, Marilyn Monroe was, of course, one of Lemmon's co-stars, and people always wanted to know how he found working with her. Here's Jack talking to Mark Cousins about the film's famous train sleeper compartment scene.
I read that, you know, she's famous for doing like 40 takes or something.
Yeah.
Did she do it here?
One take, the whole thing. And Billy said, Marilyn, do you want to do another one? She said, no. And he said, that's it. It was the first shot in the morning. It's the only time I think she ever did one take in her life. And it was not that she was not capable or that the director would cut. She would cut because she didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, an alarm clock went off in her brain and just said no, and she would stop.
So you must have dreaded scenes with her then?
In a way, except I liked her very much, and we got along great. And I knew that she had problems, and that she was not happy. I didn't know why, but I knew that she was basically not happy. It was none of my business. I never pushed it, and we never got close enough for me to find out what her troubles may have been. I mean, we all know she had troubles, but the biggest problem really was not that, it was her lateness.
Yeah.
Because she just would not come onto the set and shoot until she felt ready. And it was not temperament at all. It really was a psychological thing with her. Until she could face that camera, she wouldn't do it.
And you didn't know she was pregnant, and you didn't know she had a miscarriage during this film. It makes the film more poignant, I think, when you know that in retrospect.
Yes.
You said a fascinating thing, which was when you were playing scenes with her, it's like there was a piece of glass, a glass wall between you and her, and yet when you looked at the rushes...
Yeah, and then you'd go to the rushes and you wouldn't look at yourself, you'd just look at her. Because it seemed like nothing was happening.
Yeah.
But it was happening between her and the lens, if not between her and you know.
Do you think she would have been good in the theatre? You know, we talked before about the theatre, or was she a coincidence?
I personally don't think so. I don't know, we'll never know, but I don't think so.
Right, let's look at this.
I think she had a magic on film.
I don't want her to know we're in cahoots.
Oh, well, we won't tell anybody. We're not even Josephine.
Maybe I better stay here till she goes back to sleep.
You stay here as long as you like.
I'm not crowding you, am I?
No, it's nice and cozy.
When I was a little girl on cold nights like this, I used to crawl into bed with my sister. We'd cuddle up under the covers and pretend we were lost in a dark cave and were trying to find our way out.
Very interesting.
Anything wrong?
No, not a thing.
You poor thing, you're trembling all over.
It's ridiculous.
Your head's hot.
Ridiculous.
You've got cold feet.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Here, let me warm you up a little. There. Isn't that better?
Yes, I'm a girl.
What'd you say?
I'm a very sick girl.
Oh, I better go before I catch something.
I'm not that sick.
I've got very low resistance.
Oh, well, sugar, if you feel that you're coming down with something, my dear, the best thing in the world is a shot of whiskey.
You got some?
I know where to get it. Don't move. Hold on.
Okay.
Up, now.
Are you all right?
I'm fine.
How's the bottle?
Half full.
You better get some cups.
Cups.
And this very scene also came up in Lemmon's visit to the Parkinson show.
Oh, I tell you, my dear, this is the only way to travel.
You better put on the lights. I can't see what I'm doing.
No lights. We don't want them to know we're having a party.
But I may spill something.
So spill it. Spills, thrills, laughs, and games. This may even turn out to be a surprise party.
Actually, I think if I'd have been playing with Marilyn Monroe in that bed scene, the initial sequence there, that I'd have been glad it took 30-odd takes.
Now, you know something? That whole first long thing was the first take. Just to show you how things can happen. And it totally shocked me. It was the first take, straight through. Billy said print, and she said, I loved it too. And I thought, what happened? Where? Because I was ready to go all day. And it's lucky I got all the words right, because I had learned to kind of pace myself with Marilyn, so you don't go by it. Don't end up just exhausted and with your energy level way down as she began to, pull it all together. Because the day before, we had gone like 37 takes, and she had exactly 2 lines. Good. Where she walked in and said, where's that bourbon? Oh, there it is. But it didn't feel right for her, you see. And we went 37 takes. And next morning we came in, did the whole upper berth thing, that whole first take before he goes down to get the booze, in one. And she had it in the first crack, so you never know.
Perhaps she didn't like being in bed with you.
Ah, well.
Nobody's perfect. That marvellous thing there that Wilder did in that movie, and indeed you and Tony Curtis did, was, I mean, you wore women's clothes throughout the entire movie. And
yes.
Yeah. You trod the tightrope, didn't you, all along? It never went over into the queer thing at all.
No, not at all. I think that in a part like that if anybody would ever worry or think about that kind of self-consciousness would ruin it. I think you just have to say, forget it, and just play the part to the hilt, absolutely to the hilt, and just go to the moon with it.
Yes.
Let it go, because, or at least the character I played anyhow, is absolutely insane anyway. He never acted, he only reacted. And once I realized that, then I was all set. I mean, you know, no matter what you said, he would then react. He never stopped to think. He was incapable of creating a thought, whereas Tony's character would be the motivator. He's the one who would get the ideas. He's the one who would do it, and I'd just go and react, no matter what it was, you know. And without ever thinking. He never stopped to think. So I just never stopped to think or worry about that, said to hell with it, just go, and let it go all the way.
Did you base it, actually, on any woman at all? You may be honest on this.
No, but I'll tell you something very funny that I realized shortly afterwards. Once we had gotten the makeup right and everything, and had gotten the hair right, my mother came to the set to visit us. And I suddenly stood beside, and there was one of those wardrobe mirrors, and we both were there, and I looked, and my God, I looked just like her. I really did. She had her hair done like mine, and she always had this sort of slight bee sting, you know, the lipstick thing on there, and we really did. And so I had a couple of pictures taken of us together, and we looked like sisters. It's very funny.
Did you ever try out the disguised Jack, though, in real
Yes.
life?
Oh, yeah. When we first, it took about 3 or 4 days of tests to try to get it right, because it had to be funny, yes, but it also had to be good enough so that even though it was a broad farce, it would be believable that they could get away with it in front of the girls. So that also was another fine line about it. And when we did get the makeup to our satisfaction, we were going to lunch, Tony and I, at the commissary, and I said, wait a minute, I got an idea. And there was a bunch of girls that were working on another film in the back lot of MGM, which is where we were doing the tests. It was not an MGM film, it was a United Artists film, but that's where we were shooting at the moment. And I said, I think they're going to the ladies' room, follow them. So he said, what? I said, great, follow them. So we did. And nobody batted an eyeball. We just went right on in. And I figured if we could get by with them, you know, then... So we told Billy, and he said, terrific, that's it. We don't change anything. Yeah. And that's how we ended up with the final makeup.
Today, Some Like It Hot is considered one of cinema's greatest comedies. But Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe were by no means the only co-stars with whom Lemmon will be forever associated.
What about the extraordinary Walter Matthau I mentioned earlier? You've done The Odd Couple and Whiplash Willie. Now, there's the laconic Matthau and the frenetic you. Is it a happy combination?
Very. Again, I'm very close to him personally. I must say, I always hesitate to, if someone says, who's your favorite actor or favorite actress, because you don't wish to say someone as averse to somebody else, you know, for the sake of their feelings. But I've never worked with an actor I've enjoyed working with more than Walter, and that's just professionally, aside from the fact that we're very close friends. He is a marvelous, wonderful, thoroughly trained, disciplined, professional man of great good spirit to work with, and of course enormous talent, and a very considerate actor. He is concerned with his job within the scene, not just what he is going to do, you know. And it's a joy to work with him. He doesn't care where any camera is or anything else. He wants to work with you and not at you. And I tell you, it's usually you work at an actor and not with them.
And here's an example of Lemmon and Matthau working together, even though they were 1,000 miles apart, on The Wogan Show in 1989.
There was another hilarious role as that fussy, the motherly Felix.
Oh, Felix.
In The Odd
God.
Couple.
Well,
I mean, we've got a little clip
that's
from that.
not only a great role, but there I was playing with one of my very dearest friends, and
Walter Matthau.
Oh yeah, it's a joy.
We've got a
that's
little
not
picture.
even like work. That's sort of like just sitting down and chatting over breakfast or something. You know,
He's an old pal. Let's
Wait,
have a
you
look
clip
at
of that? What
Yeah,
is
we
that?
got a clip of it over here.
Stop that, will you? What are you doing?
I'm trying to clear up my ears. You create a pressure inside your head. It opens up the eustachian tube.
Did it open up?
I think I strained my throat.
That wonderful clearing of the throat. I mean, I don't know. How did Walter Matthau keep a straight face? How did you keep
How he keep a straight face? That was the toughest scene in the film for me because I could not look at Walter. Just those sly little, those looks of his just absolutely destroyed. What he does, if he says hello, I'm on the floor.
Well, let's see if he'll say hello to us now because he's with us by satellite from Los Angeles.
You're kidding.
So can we call him in? Walter Matthau, are you with us? There is the man himself.
That's my Walter. Hey, Walt. Hello. Oh, for God's sake. It's terrific. Hey, what are you doing? Where are you?
Well, I'm here at the St. James Club.
Yeah?
And Betty Davis is sitting over there. She looks about as bad as I do.
Gee, there's old Silvertongue. He's at it again.
I'm here. I just want to say this fellow went to Harvard University and graduated, and his finest moment on the stage is when he went, yeah, yeah, yeah.
He said,
how are you doing, Jack?
Terrific. I miss you. I miss
Are
you.
you
I'm
all
having
right?
a great time. Yeah.
How do we get you back? How much do they want?
I don't know. That's
How
up
can
to
we
the
get
critics.
you back?
We may find out
No,
very
I mean,
shortly.
Aren't you being held hostage?
Probably. Yeah.
How are they treating you? Are you all right?
I am terrific. I'm having a wonderful time. I'm working with some great
You
guys.
never call me? You don't call? You don't write? You don't fax?
All right, I'll call. I'll write.
Why don't you fax?
All right, I'll fax.
What's going on over there?
I'm doing a play, you dummy.
You're in a play?
Yeah.
You mean you're acting?
Yeah. I'm acting with some terrific guys. You'd love it.
They pay you money to do this?
Oh, yeah. Sure. I finally got
That's
the hang
remarkable.
of it. Yeah.
Oh, no wonder you left America and went to England. They give you money there.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
are you guys great
That's
friends? Do you two meet on a social level? I mean, or is it just pals in the movies? What do you do when you get together? Do you...
Well, mainly
every Christmas.
Mainly
His
we listen to our
wife is a
wives
very
talk.
extravagant woman. His wife buys me very expensive gifts, so I stay friendly with him.
Lemmon often said comedy drama was the hardest thing to get right. That didn't mean the serious roles were easy.
A very different part for you, a very different film, of course, was Days of Wine and Roses.
Yes.
What made you particularly want to do that subject, which is about alcoholism, wasn't it, Jake?
I was afraid of it. That's one of the reasons.
Really?
I think there's been parts that I don't mean that they are necessarily difficult, but they might be to me. And if I've read a script and I know damn well that it's good and that that's a heck of a part, but I'm a little afraid of it, then I really don't want to turn it down because I'll start rationalizing and I'll spend the rest of my time saying, you backed away from it, kid, you were afraid. So I'd rather do it if I felt that strongly about it and flop than not do it. And I didn't know how to play the part. That's another thing that attracts me. If I can finish a script and I don't know how to play that part yet, then there's something there. You know, you've got to dig, and there's something defined, rather than say, oh, that's 4H, I did him last year, you know, or that's off the side of your foot because you've played him, you know, or it's skin deep, it's just surface. Yes. And it's those two things, if I don't know how to play them, and if I'm a little bit afraid, I felt that about that part, and so I said, okay, let's go. And I felt it about Save the Tiger, which is a film that's not out yet, that I just finished before Avanti. Same thing, and that's a heavy drama also.
Well, let's look at, there's one particular scene from Days of Wine and Roses, which I shall always remember, which when I first saw it in the cinema, really made me catch my breath. It's a scene where all of a sudden it turns nasty, where this sort of comic drunk really gets it. That's the most extraordinary blend, isn't it, of comedy and real drama. I mean, the flowers behind the back, that's pure Keaton, that, isn't it? It's just that awful walk into that plate glass.
I love things like that. Blake Edwards, who directed that, usually, it was interesting because Blake, I had done practically all comedies as far as films were concerned up to that point, and Blake had done practically all comedies, you know, Pink Panther, this, that. He's certainly more known as a comedy director. But I don't know why, I got that crazy idea of picking the flowers. It was not in the script, of picking the flowers, of almost walking through the thing, and then having the elevator doors chop them off, so that later, in the middle of a dramatic fight, which comes after that, I could suddenly notice them and wonder what the hell happened to him, because he never did figure it out. I love if you can put comedy into drama. I love it. It's because that's what life is like. We tend to sort of label films. If it's a comedy, it's supposed to be a comedy, and if it's a drama, it's a drama. That's why Billy in The Apartment did such a brilliant job of putting comedy and drama and romance together. He's done it again in Avanti, I think. And it's not easy, but it's always marvelous, sometimes even if it's just for relief. I remember being struck years ago when I saw Marlon. Marlon Brando, who else? When I saw Marlon in Streetcar Named Desire, which was one of the great performances I've ever seen by any actor, anywhere, anytime. This was in the theater prior to us doing it on a film. Now, Streetcar Named Desire won the Pulitzer Prize and all of that, and certainly was a magnificent, heavy drama. But it had more laughs than any comedy running on Broadway that year. It had an enormous number of laughs, hundreds of them. And it ran very long because of that. They had to invent business all over the stage while people were laughing about every fourth or fifth line, and yet it had a tremendous power. And when you can combine comedy with drama like that, I think it's always much more telling.
Let's have a look at another sequence from Days of Wine and Roses now, which shows this sort of heavy side that we were talking about. It's a sequence, in fact, when you're finally taking the cure. You're in the straitjacket.
Oh, yes.
Did you actually observe people going through?
Yes, we went, it was terrible. Both Lee Remick, who played in it with me, of course, and I went very often down to the drunk tanks, and we go down late at night to the Lincoln Heights jail and outside of Los Angeles, and observe them. It's frightening. The drying out tables, too. and the straitjackets and everything. It's really not the slightest bit exaggerated. They just go totally berserk.
Terrifying.
They're gone, that's all. Totally out of it.
What effect did it have on your drinking habits?
Drove me to drink. Naturally. What else would it do? A part like that? No, it didn't. I don't think it had any effect at all.
Didn't it?
Really.
It didn't make you frightened of it?
No, I still kept 2-3 bottles a day.
Has drink ever affected your work?
God, I hope not. I don't think so. I hope not.
You'll have observed people in your business whose work it has affected.
Yes, not very often.
No.
I've seen, there are some, and it's a pity. If they're going to drink when they work. I mean, that's, usually if drink affects an actor's work, it's because basically he's petrified in the first place. If he ever drinks before a performance, I mean, I don't give a damn how much he drinks afterwards, but the actor that drinks before to give himself a little lift or a boost is in trouble, I think, emotionally, because he really doesn't want to go out there in the first place, or he wouldn't do it.
Another of Lemmon's heavier roles came in the 1982 controversial political drama, Missing. Based on a true story, the film was attacked by the US government for claiming that America was involved in the military overthrow of Chile's President Allende. Lemmon played Ed Horman, an American patriot whose belief in his country is shattered as he searches for his journalist son, who's gone missing in the coup. Here we find Lemmon in a serious mode, discussing the film and how he found portraying a real-life character.
I was terribly pleased once I had met him, because we did not meet until towards the very end of the film, which I think is good. So I didn't have any restrictions placed on me in my attitude towards the character. He, at least in the broad strokes, the general basic characteristics that I found from the pages are in Ed Horman, thank God. So I don't feel guilty that I portrayed a man who is quite different than the real man is. There's an innate decency and a dignity about him that's absolutely unflappable. It's quite wonderful. There's a great strength. He's got a big, strong rod up his back, you know, morally and ethically. He's a very principled man. I don't think that man could tell a lie if his life depended on it. He's not capable of doing that, you know. Which also made me feel good, because I feel that it's basically his story. We are not saying that there was complicity of the government. We are saying that Ed Horman says there was complicity in his mind. There's a big difference there. But I believe him. I really would tend to believe this man because he's intelligent, a very naive man as he started out, who was wised up quite rapidly to the ways of political life. And the fact that being an American does not mean that you are given preferential treatment all over the world. You know, I think we Americans think that because we sit naively over there in that huge country, untouched and unsurrounded. And we just somehow think that, well, you know, Americans are known all over the world. Anywhere we go, we'll be taken care of. Everything will be fine, you know. But that's not true, necessarily.
I don't know what happened to your kid, Ed. But I understand he was a bit of a snoop. He poked his nose around in a lot of dangerous places where he really didn't belong. Now, suppose I went up to your town, New York, and I started messing around with the mafia. I wind up dead in the East River. And my wife, or my father, complained to the police because they didn't protect me. They really wouldn't have much of a case, would they? You play with fire, you get burned.
But did it worry you that the American government reacted against the film as it did?
No, I was thrilled. I loved it. I'll tell you why. They would never have done it. They would never have come out with that long, 500-word denunciation or whatever, saying this is distortion of facts and these things did not occur as the film says. Well, it is not distortion of facts. They did occur. But they have to protect the stand they always had. They would never have taken that stand unless the film were very strong and unless it was a hit. you see. So it was flattering in a way that for the first time in history, the State Department comes out against a film. The book came out, you know, 4 or 5 years before that, and it was not a bestseller. They didn't say boo. Nobody said anything. They didn't criticize. They just didn't say anything about it. But when the film was a hit, boom, then they felt they had to do something to save face.
Missing and another political thriller, The China Syndrome, were impressive additions to Lemmon's body of work and his reputation for versatility. So, which of his roles was his own personal favourite?
What do you think was your best work?
I don't know. I can't judge that. I know that for about half of the parts that I've done, and all of the good ones, I have been afraid of them. But I learned early on that that's okay. It started way back with Days of Wine and Roses. I found that I was scared to death once I said I want to play it. Then I was worried, can I play it? And I realized that's good, because you're not going to relax. You're going to do better work, whether you're good, bad, or indifferent. You'll do better work if you're a little bit afraid, hey, maybe I can't do this.
Are you any judge of when you see the finished work? Are you any judge of whether it's any good or not? Or do you think it's all good?
Not always. Oh, God, last time I was on, Crazy Walter, my friend Matthau came on, you know, and so forth. One time I thought I had done a brilliant job in a film called Alex and the Gypsy. I think it hit the 50-cent houses in about 1 minute. But anyway, comes the first sneak preview. I couldn't wait to bring my friend Walter, huh? Now, unlike the theater, where we're faced with that terrible thing where you go back to see a friend who's just opened in a play, and you don't know what you're going to say if the performance is no good or if the play is a turkey or this and that, you always worry, what am I going to say to him? You know, oh, you've done it again, or what are you going to do? In a film, the one difference is that's it. It's there forever. You know, unlike a play, at least that can close. Well, I brought Walter to the screening of Alex and the Gypsy. We sat in the back. I think by the time the lights came up, there was 10 people left. They had all gone up and just disappeared during the screening. It was just god-awful. It was awful. And I then realized it. So the last of the people had gone out. Walter was sitting beside me just... And I said, all right, Waltz, what do you think? He said, get out of it. That's my favorite. It was almost worth doing the film for that line. How the hell do you get out of a film? You know?
That's a lot of help.
But you can. Sometimes you think... When you feel in a film, I think, or in a play very often, you feel, hey, this is not going very well. Usually you're right. It's not too good. But sometimes you can think, oh, boy, this is terrific, and it's not.
Failures like that were few and far between. But there might have been more had Lemmon been forced into one particular genre of film that he definitely didn't feel suited to.
Has anybody ever tried, Jack, to persuade you to do something other than play a 20th century man? I mean, have you ever had an offer of a biblical role or anything like that?
I did a test. Thank God that Harry Cohen and I hit it off as well as we did, because they were doing Joseph and His Brethren years ago. It never was finally made. And as a matter of fact, I think Tony at one point was going to play it. He would have been infinitely superior to me in it. But can you see me as Joseph? Well, Harry kept saying, now come on, please do this test. And I kept saying, listen, I don't, it's wrong, please. And Jerry Wald, who was then alive, was producing it, and Clifford Odets was writing it. And they all kept after me, and I said, well, I can't refuse. I didn't have the right to refuse, as a matter of fact. So I did. Well, they brought me up and put on this thing, this kind of a skirt with a belt down to here and one strap over, and then the sandals with the laces up to here. Oh, Jesus. I walked onto that set to do a serious scene, and the grips started falling out of the rafters. I never, ever in any comedy got as big a laugh as I got in that. We could not shoot all morning long. Every time I'd opened my mouth, they'd start going, and the cameras were jiggling, guys were turning away, and it was just awful, just god-awful. I did the test with Rita Hayworth.
And she had a great deal of trouble, I'll tell you, because she'd start cracking up in the middle of the scenes.
Yeah.
And I tried my best. But then Harry said, okay, you don't have to play the part. He said, but if you ever give me any trouble and you try to back out of a picture that I'm going to put you in, he says, I'm going to show everybody in town that test. So he held it over me.
The Hollywood epic aside, Jack Lemmon showed time and again that he was one of cinema's finest actors and with the greatest range. When Jack died in 2001, at the age of 76, one line quoted repeatedly summed up the reaction. It came from the great director Billy Wilder, who simply said, "Happiness is working with Jack Lemmon."